Okay. All right, we'll get us started here. So, are you ready?
Let's do it.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dan, for joining me. I'd like to give everyone a chance first to just introduce themselves, let us know who we're talking to, give us just a brief history of who you are, um, and know what we're going to hear today.
Okay. Brief history of me. Well, just because I'm a little bit older than a few people, that means it's a longer history. Um, but out of college, Marine officer, then went to Wall Street, was in investment management and research for nearly 20 years. That would be big institutional investment management funds, was a portfolio manager, managed a hedge fund, and along the way had a car accident that uh, where I was basically rebuilt. Traumatic brain injury, had to have my face and head and everything rebuilt. Um, Came back from that, turned to ultra running and marathons, and then in 2010-11, decided I wasn't going to play, not play, but be involved in the investment management industry anymore, and got into executive coaching because one of the things I enjoyed most was working with my teams and leaders as I was going up the ranks, so to speak, and running my own stuff. And so for the past decade, I've worked in leadership development and coaching, and primarily leadership development, although I do a lot of career transition work, primarily with attorneys who are switching careers
Oh,
and moves.
okay.
So part of a firm that I am in with my wife, and we have 8 other people on our team, and they do executive coaching, leadership development as well. Um,
Okay. Wow.
so that's what we do.
Okay. Okay. So,
So
so
that's who you're talking to.
all right, great. I know I've heard
Oh, and
some
I
of
was
this
going to say,
before.
and the one thing that obviously because we know each other, one of my little um, adjunct kind of side things that I do is I actually teach coaching and training for the Academy of Creative Coaching. So
That's
uh,
right. Dan was my mentor coach through my training. We talked to Jay earlier, also from the academy. So a lot of great connections there. But yeah, so I know I've heard some of your story before, Dan, and hearing it again, it's no less shocking, really, sometimes to hear some of, just as you mentioned, so much. We live so many lives in our one lifetime, sometimes it seems. So can you tell us then what was kind of, would you say would be the major, maybe a major transition for you or a major change for you that kind of shifted the whole direction of what you were doing that you want to focus on for this conversation?
Um, well, it's sort of a bilateral thing. The first thing that happened obviously was that accident, and I don't want to go into the gory details other than I was in a car accident, uh, literally lost my life, was revived, was rebuilt and put back together. And so that's always stayed with me, just the good graces that when you see so many that are in such a state of disability, and that how just absolutely fortunate that I was you know um, to survive that and thrive after it. And and there's little quirks to it. Still to this day, nobody can see it, nobody can do it. I just sort of know it myself. But that's fine. But I think that probably over the time, though, in the back half of the investment management career, gave me a lot more compassion towards others that
Mm.
were in the the thing. I think that I was probably the type of person, just probably more out of ignorance, where somebody had a migraine. What do you mean you can't come to work? Let's go. You can't. Uh,
Yeah.
let's drive. And this gave me a little window into, hmm, I may not be able to see it, but there's something else going on there, and I need to be aware of it. And as I started to focus on that more, I think that's what led me towards the coaching journey and that transition. And I will say, I can say today, that was not easy. Because one, you have something where everybody knows you in a certain way. You have a reputation, you have done this, you're financially this, type of things. And you're essentially saying, not that they're not good enough, but that I don't want to be part of your club anymore. Um, and that's not really what I was saying. I was just saying, I want to go explore something else that might be of interest.
Yeah.
Um, the sort of the takeaway was is that I thought wrongly, I will admit, that I would come into coaching and automatically all of these people that I had been peers with and fellow executives with on different stuff would just want to come over and work with me. I did not work with the very first person who knew me from my previous life for 4 years.
Oh,
So everything that was created after I got done with coach training was not from anybody I knew before. And I think a lot of it is because they were wondering, could you do it? Would you
mm,
do it? Can we entice you to come back and do something with it? I did some projects initially that were financial related. So it was always, well, he might come back. And when I think after time, people realized either because they may have thought I had diminished skill set or I really wasn't going to come back.
mm.
And that's when it really took off on the coaching side, I think is when I realized I wasn't ever really going to go back and they realized I wasn't coming back.
Okay.
People still ask me today why the heck you did that. Or usually it's how did you do it?
Yeah.
And you have to be willing to accept that it's not going to look the same, obviously, for everybody. But you had to have the financial ability to do it. There were
Right.
some things like that that just I I will not I won't sugarcoat that part of it wasn't great on some things just because you were used to something.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and at the same time, though, I didn't have any regrets about it.
Okay.
Um,
Well, if you don't mind, I just want to point out something. I think I heard you say though, when after your accident, you started thinking about things differently and approaching your job differently, and that's kind of what started you thinking about a new career choice. And I just want to point out for anybody who might be listening that it's okay for you to learn something new and then change your direction based off of that new information, right?
Absolutely, and I wouldn't recommend that as the learning
Well,
experience
no,
from it.
no,
Yeah. um,
no, not at all. But sometimes it's like we might get trapped or something, and we might think, oh man, I was doing something wrong, or I've been doing it like this before. But we hear this a lot, that it's okay that when you learn something new, that you know do better once you know better, sort of a thing, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and I will say that that new sort of the compassion that was developed out of that um, changed the lens that I looked at things in terms of, you well, I mean, I could even say some things politically or some things
Mm-hmm.
issue-wise, not across the spectrum, but just real specific things
Yeah.
to give me a little bit more, of a different view, or things I may have disagreed with before. I thought, well, I probably need to go dig a little bit more. Heck, I've done research on everything else. Why wouldn't I do it on this? And I think that it opened me up from a social perspective to look at it a little differently.
Yeah.
Um,
And that's what happens sometimes too, right? Is you just have a moment of clarity that kind of gets you questioning things a little bit, and then it leads to another thing and another thing. So, oh, I think it's so great that you pointed that out, though. I wanted to make sure that I highlighted that. But I also heard you say though some interesting things about the challenges that you faced in that transition, about other people perhaps not taking you seriously or thinking that your skills weren't there. Could you talk a little bit more about what that experience was
yeah,
like for you?
that's, well, I mean, I think anytime you go through, we'll just say in this case, coach training, you get done, of course, you don't feel like you're really that good at it when you're done anyways. I mean, so there's that natural feeling that I'm a neophyte, and so I'm the newbie in town. But I have all these other really great skills, and there's this natural tension between, am I really going to move towards what I had intended, or am I going to let this thing that I've done, this career that I've had, be an anchor in some ways?
Mm.
And so you have a little bit of a push pull there
Mm.
because that's comfortable, it's familiar, I mean,
Yeah.
I still to this day, a decade later, can tell you exactly how I could go and do X, Y, and Z and get paid get
Yeah.
paid. Um, because I know how to do it doesn't
Yeah.
mean that I have any interest in doing it. Um, and it was moving towards an unfamiliar and having to be listen a lot differently, a lot more empathetically to people because what we're working on now was not my agenda, it was theirs. And
Yeah.
how do I come beside people and do that? The challenge, though, was okay, how do you make a business out of it?
Yeah. So how
It
did you keep yourself on track moving towards the coaching business and not going back to what was comfortable for you?
um, well, I didn't initially. I sort of went back and forth,
Okay.
played there. It was not until I decided, though, 100% that I couldn't mix the two that it really, really took off. I needed to shut the door. I needed to close the door.
Ooh, okay.
Because when if you let anything, even the light seep in under the crack in the bottom, it has you thinking, maybe I can. Maybe I can play with both.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm sure there's somebody out there that can do it. For me, that was not possible. And and I would tell you that as you look at any of the great, and I'm not saying I'm great, but just great leaders on that, they focus on the one or two things that they do really well.
Hmm.
They don't try to have um, 10 things or 10 different
Yeah.
businesses. And if they do, what they do is they get other people to run them,
Yep.
and they shrink the span of control down to just a couple.
Yep.
And so I think that was that willingness to finally just shut that door
Yeah.
and be okay with it.
Uh,
Um,
And I think that's going to be a difficult message for people to hear because I've talked to some other folks who mentioned a similar thing, especially when you're leaving and trying something all over again. It can kind of grab onto you to say, I'm over here, I'm comfortable, I'm familiar, you know what's over here, you've got the money, security, whatever it is. And so it is hard to let that go to
it
pursue
is.
this.
And
Yeah.
and the thing is that you make it to a thing where it never gets back to the same. If you were measuring something just on a monetary basis, maybe it never gets back to that level. Um, and at the same time, though, there are some other benefits that aren't necessarily attached to that.
Yeah.
Um, you know, I can tell you that in those years, I was a million miler on two different airlines, and on a third one, they don't calculate it that way. But I had enough that I could have a friend fly with me for free. That's how much time I spent going back. Um, you know, my life doesn't look like that anymore.
Right.
I now fly primarily because I want to.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I've got client things so I go, but well, because of the environment, and now nobody wants to see us anyways, but that's different. Um,
Right.
or at least not, show up in their office. They're not in their office. But even if we were, it wouldn't look the same.
Yeah.
And so but you realize of how many hundreds or thousands of hours you spent in airports or connecting to things or doing
Hmm.
all that.
Hmm.
And that has been just an absolute source of joy not to do it.
Yeah.
Uh, don't, um, and and I think that the focus, and this is much more of a focus on the other, working with people to help them realize their agenda, their dreams, their thing. Um, that's pretty gratifying, and that's a different kind of gratifying than if you do it as a coach within an organization where like that was your own role. Yeah, I mean that's gratifying.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying one's a better or worse thing, but you're there for the organization's benefit at that.
Yeah.
Coming from the outside, the only thing that really made, yes, I realize the organization hired us and that's part of it, but it's really to benefit that individual.
Right.
What they do with it in the organization is of a different,
Right.
context.
Yeah, and I think that's also another great point that you bring up here is just really aligning yourself with what's important to you in terms of the benefits, as you call them, right? Because as you said, you may never get back to where you were financially in that other position, but would you say that you are any more or less fulfilled in what you're doing now? I mean, do you feel like you're missing out because of that?
Um, I would say that I am way more fulfilled, and I will also admittedly say the income differential today is not that significantly
Yeah.
different. It's much closer than I ever dreamed it would be.
Okay.
Um, admittedly, that was so that part of it's been great, but it wasn't something that was that was like the try to attain thing. Yeah, way more fulfillment though,
Yeah.
and I think part of the fulfillment though comes from like, okay, we're doing this now. It's for me, it's 5 o'clock on the East Coast, it's 2 on the West for you. I've got, I don't know, I think tomorrow I have 2 meetings. Well, I had 4 today. I basically get to set my own clock.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I want to go take a run or a walk in the middle of the day or go
Mm-hmm.
do something like that, um, all I have to do is just arrange my schedule to make that happen.
Yep.
Um, and so that I think that benefit though is really, really extreme.
Yeah. But for anybody who's considering going into business for yourself, I'm gonna word of caution there because you do get
Oh,
addicted to you get addicted to like setting your own schedule and you're like, oh, I have one meeting today. I do not want to overdo it.
well, I know. Yeah, the flip side of that though is no work, no pay.
Well, yes, but
I mean, unless of course you've got the leverage, within it and other people that are working for you, and we're fortunate in that aspect. But still, it
yeah.
it is something. Yeah, I guess you could go overboard. My natural competitor doesn't let me do that,
Okay.
and at the same time, though, it has really, made me control. Like, it used to be I'd be up. I would absolutely be in. When I was working in the what do we call it, the Central Time Zone, before the markets opened at 9, we had a meeting and a call, an analyst meeting and everything. That meant I was in the office because, we're 1 hour earlier there at 7 a.m.
Mm.
But that meant though to get up, do a run, do all that. Well, I had to be up at 4:30. But then at the end of the day, you were back on sort of the way the East Coast guys were working it. And so it was like, okay, well, then you're going to stay till 6 or 7 at night. And that just sort of was it for years. And I feel like I'm on free time ever since, now. I never dreamed of going out in the middle of the day. Um, so that's all the positive. The negative, though, or the downside is you have to actually build a client portfolio or stable here now that you can sustain yourself and have different, business things. So between training, coaching, and then teaching, like for ACC, I've got a portfolio of different things that I do.
Right. Right. Oh, it's so good. Okay, and then another thing though I wanted to circle back on that I heard you mention too is this idea of kind of focusing in on one thing, because
Hmm.
when you go out on your own, I'm guilty of this myself. You get caught up, you want to try all the things, especially in the coaching industry, because
The
we learn
shiny object.
yeah, we learn skills that help us really, like, we feel like anyway, we can help anyone in any situation because it's just about mindset and transformation, and the client has the answers. But can you tell us a little bit more about this, how you kind of focus in or narrow down, and maybe what challenges you had there when you were going out on your own?
Well, I thought I could coach everybody. First, I thought I could, and then I thought I would, and then I realized that there were certain people I didn't really want to. So that was a discovery. That was a discovery for me. Um, the thing with the focus, though, is as you said, there's a ton of different tools. I mean, gosh, there's more assessments out there than you know. So if you want to do any career work, pick your one or two. It's not going to change. Ultimately, what you're doing is facilitating learning for somebody and helping them grow. The tools are great. You will go broke trying to get certified in every one of them,
Hmm.
as probably people will discover if they try that. Um, and so I think that that was part of it. And then it was determining who, like, what is the population, the target audience that you wanted to work with? Well, where I have tended to go in this, I realize everybody says you can coach anyone. It doesn't matter whether I can, it's who wants me to do it. So a lot of
Hmm.
times people from financial positions in organizations or the investment industry or the insurance, something to do financially or financial roles in any, well, they see my background and they say, well, that even though it shouldn't matter, it does to them. And so that has been the thing that I've leaned towards. And then the other area is because if you look at our team, we have a lot of other people, including my spouse, who's, we're practicing attorneys or are currently. Um, we do, we work with lawyers, whether they're in-house counsels or whether they're in firms, whether they're looking to develop or they're looking at career change. So it's it's a very narrow group of people.
Hmm.
It's not everybody, and that has its own challenges. But I think that I was drawn more to that um, because they were in a lot of ways peers across various interests that I thought that I could help people develop more. I find a bunch of areas of coaching really interesting, but I have come to conclude that while I may find it interesting, I'm probably not going to be the best person
Hmm.
to do it. I would love to just sit here and watch somebody else.
Yeah.
Um, it'd be
and that
nice.
and, yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say that's a tricky thing, but it's a good thing for us to be able to do, is identify our limits. Um,
Yeah.
and,
Um,
recognize. I know when I graduated from engineering school, I took an oath, I wear a ring that says that I'm not going to practice engineering in something where I'm not an expert. I'm not going to go, I studied civil engineering, so I'm not going to go out there and pretend to be a chemical engineer or say anything about it, because that's not my area of expertise. And to be able to just stand back and say, this is the thing that I'm good at. This is the thing that I'm not good at. That's okay to
even if I
do.
wish I was.
Right.
Well, I mean, I'll give you an example right now that in some ways we'll call it. I don't consider it controversial, but I look at it a lot of times when people are doing DEI training and that I can be a voice in the room to give a perspective, but I probably shouldn't be the only voice in the room because I bring a very narrow perspective. Um, I'm oftentimes asked about it because I'm at least willing to listen and I've sat in that seat.
Right.
Or how do you get into this, get this group to listen more? Um, but I would never dream of going out and saying I was an expert in that because, gosh, how could I ever say that I felt or experienced
Right.
90% of the things that people have in that regard.
Right.
Um, I can observantly, I could tell you what someone's experienced, but I can't say I've actually felt it myself.
Yep.
So it's more of an academic exercise in some
Yeah.
ways, um,
Yeah. But
which,
it's a good point for people to understand their limits and recognize that, yes, you may want to do more things, you might want to help more people depending on what your thing is, but ultimately you're probably going to help the right people if you narrow yourself down, right? You're going to get connected to the right people, you're going to attract the right folks to you, as you mentioned, the people that you want to work with and that you don't want to work with, and
well,
you're just
yeah,
going
I
to be
mean,
more
that's,
effective in that way.
yeah, I mean, I find, as I look at people in various areas of coaching, and I'm thinking, like a lot of people spend a lot of time in the neuroscience area. I think it's fascinating academically, but for me to really, really dig deep, I'm not really sure that I would be able to add so much more value
Right.
than turning and saying, this is probably who you should work with, because that's their real focus and area of expertise. It's not mine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then all I can do is just hope that if I refer somebody over there, that maybe when they find a senior executive or a lawyer or something, they'll turn around and send it back my direction.
Right.
Um, that is the hope.
That's the hope. So let's just kind of wrap up here then. I know you've
Sure.
told us a little bit here, but compared to where you sort of started your journey, at least in your professional career and with what you're doing now, how would you say that you're feeling now about the work that you do?
I actually feel very, very satisfied with it. I feel grateful that I get to do it. Um,
Ooh,
and I feel grateful that, for some of the things I mentioned, that I have much more input into my own life.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
Um, because there's this old, I guess it's a saying or a quote or there, we live our lives by default or by design. And so you have to decide, do you want to design your life or are you going to accept what you default to?
That's good. I like that.
And so I feel like I'm designing my life.
Yeah.
And if I
I need to write
didn't,
that down.
and if I didn't, I'd be sort of defaulting to whatever came my way or was told to do. So I think a lot of times people end up in organizations, nothing wrong with organizations, but they'll end up in a career and they're overpowered by should or overpowered by the voice on the shoulder that says, I can't,
Yeah.
or maybe you shouldn't. And I realize everybody has their own life circumstance with it that may not afford them the opportunity. But for those that are truly curious, and you probably could, listen to the little voice that says, test it out, because, you know, you may find that source of joy for you that it will give you a lot more uh, time, energy, and attention going forward.
I love it. That's great. And I love that you said too that you feel grateful for being able to do what you do, because honestly, I found that for myself as well, where it's like, I can't believe I get to do this. And that's such a different sort of attitude than,
Well, think about it. You as an engineer, I mean, I know a lot of engineers, and I'm not saying, gosh, like I think, mechanical engineering or chemistry or civil engineering, I think it's fascinating what's created. And I'm so thankful that nobody ever asked me to do it because it wouldn't have ended up well for anybody. And so I am grateful that there are others that have that talent and thankful every day. And that's just, that's how I look at it. And then of course, I also have the additional gratitude that I get to be here every day.
yeah.
I mean, my stuff was an experiment when they did it, and it actually turned out pretty well.
Yeah, good,
Actually,
good.
January 1st was the 25th anniversary.
Really? Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
so I am one of the long-term survivors of that particular procedure.
Wow.
So yeah,
That's
so
great.
just really grateful for that. And Yeah, that's if that doesn't humble you, nothing will.
Right. Oh, wow. Geez. Oh man. So how do we follow that up? So how about just do you have any final words or thoughts, advice for anybody who might find themselves facing down maybe a tough decision or a major change, anything like that for them?
Two things, and I won't tell you where this came from, but it came out of a thing of, and I'm not a Bible beating type person, but it came out of something out of Solomon. And this person came up with saying about, wisdom in something or what is wise. And he said, um, in light of my personal history, my current circumstances, my future hopes and dreams, what is the wise thing to do? Is the decision I'm about to make wise? And
Mm,
looking at things like that through that lens and using that as a little bit of a guide.
okay.
Um, and and then I would close with saying just one thing. It comes from Eleanor Roosevelt, and she said, "The future is for those who believe in the beauty of their dreams." So my add-on is, so dream big, because when you lose sight of the goal, obstacles get in the way.
Mm, okay.
So
Good stuff. That is good stuff.
now you
I
can
love it.
stop that recording.
I'm gonna I'm gonna stop the recording. I do like to give people a chance though to if there's anything that you want to do some promotion or let us know how we can support you, anything like that, you do have the opportunity here as well to do.
I would say that if anybody wants to work with anyone at Novateur Partners, it's www.novateur, that's Novateur partners.com. And just got a team in the executive coaching leadership development space and would love to, speak with you and um, work with anybody that thinks that we may be a good fit.
Right. All right. Well, thank you so much, Dan. This was a great conversation. I know, see, you're just proving this is why I love to do these because I hear such good things.
Okay. You get stuff for your notebook.
That's right. I get so many good sound bites and good little
Yeah,
inspirational
sound bites are
tidbits.
good.
I
Sound
love
bites are
them.
good.
I love them. So thank you so much for joining me.
Unfortunately, we do news in sound bites, which is not good.
Well, right.
Yeah,
But
I know.
it's fine for social media though. So,
It is. It works for there, as long as you're not trying to have an argument with it.
right. All right. So I'm gonna go ahead and end the recording here.
Okay.
All right. Thanks again. Oh, I think I'm gonna end the recording.